Okay, so we're going to do a quick video for you guys to kind of look at going through Unity and how to make different things in Unity, and hopefully it'll help you guys kind of get started. So we kind of talked a little bit about the hub in some of the classes, and some of the video conferences, but whenever you start Unity, you always start from the hub. So in the hub, you should have whatever Unity version you've installed at the moment installed. Maybe, like me, you've got a couple of different older versions. If you haven't got this, you need to make sure that you have this, because Unity Hub is just kind of launching platform. We kind of might have already had this conversation with you, but something like, Epic Games Launcher or Battle.net or Steam, where you just launch different editors. If you're don't have anything installed, you just click add. Obviously, it's hard for me to add because I've added all the versions. Most of the versions are here. You just go next, and then it'll also ask you keep on pressing next, and you'll add Visual Studios as well. If it then it'll then a little blue line will appear, and once that's done, it'll be complete like this. If you have a bar down here that says licensing is validating, or just come up here, click sign in, and then go manage licenses, and then you just go pick the personal, select I don't use this for professional means, and it should all just work. It's all free as long as you're not planning on selling your games. So once that's done, you can just come from here and you can create a project from here. So you can select your version if you'd like to use another version. You go new, 3D, 2D, name it, and then you can pick its location. To save time for this video, obviously, I've already created a 3D project. So I just want to quickly go through a couple of things in here, kind of get you all kind of on the same page. So we have the hierarchy here, the console down here, and the inspector over here. This is what's in your current scene. This will look almost identical for each different 3D or 2D. The only difference is that in 3D you can hold multiple scenes here, so you can call this scene level 1, level 2, level 3, and you can close them and open them and then have multiple scenes. In 2D you have to fully close the level and then create a new level and then kind of drag them up from the scene manager here. But that's kind of, don't worry too much about that for now. Down here is your project. This is where all your packages and assets, if you've downloaded any, will appear. I really recommend that, I've already talked about this with the Year 8s at least, is that you make lots of folders and become really organized here so that, prefabs, create new assets, stuff like that. Become really organized down here so that it makes your life a lot easier. A couple of things that I'll talk about is if you haven't opened it, you go Window, obviously go Asset Store. I've run through this with a lot of you. This is where you get a lot of your free assets. Yeah. Cool. That's interesting. It's moved apparently as of this version of Unity to a website, but I can show you that. Sorry, it's just currently on my second screen. That's all. Boom. There we go. And then you have your asset store, and within the asset store, obviously, you can come down and pick free, and you can click 3D or 2D. The 2D ones are the ones I really recommend. There are some 3D ones. I've not really played around with them a lot. They're a little bit harder to use, and 3D in general is a little bit harder to use. So that's the asset store, and then obviously you pick something that you like. I don't know, for example, we want to use the fantasy forest, maybe, I don't know. This looks kind of cool. You go add to my assets. Open in Unity. Open link. Let's see how this goes. And then you got package manager. Obviously a little bit new for the newer version. And here we go. And then you can go download. Oh, that's actually kind of interesting. It works a little differently now. And import. And then import. Obviously, it'll take a little while to do that. Mind my cracking back. And that's really handy. The other thing I really recommend you do is go to this package manager and Unity registered. Now, it used to be, if it's an older version, it'll say like all packages and package register. And this thing here called Cinema Machine, Sign Machine, Sin Machine, I don't know what you want to call it. Install this. This is marvelous. In particular, if you're using if you're doing 2D games, so good with 2D games. And just add this package as well. And this is an actual Unity owned package. Yeah. So back to our scene, and it'll appear up here. Cinema Machine. I'm gonna go full screen. It's just a little camera mod that'll help you a lot. Okay, so now we've got that. We've got this Fantasy Forest package that we added in, and obviously to help myself, I'm going to put this in my assets folder. So I made this folder called assets. Okay, so back to what we were doing. So obviously you can, your scene is here, and then always in a 3D you have a machine and the sun. And if you click on the game, you can kind of see that we see nothing, just kind of like the horizon, sky. If you want to change the color of the sky, you can do that. It's kind of here, but I don't really recommend doing that a lot. There are some other options like fog and stuff like that, which we might get into later if you want to make some like fog in games and stuff like that. And then over here we have the inspector, obviously, which is what I'm looking at these kind of things in. So if you click on the camera, you can see the options for the camera in the inspector, and over down here is our projects where our console is. So if you just right click here, you can go create 3D object and create a cube. You'll see we got two views here. In the game view now, that because if you clicked on the camera when you create something, it creates it in the center of the view of the camera. So we've got this cube now, which we can highlight here, and you can kind of see it in the game view. If you go into the scene view, I can actually click on it and I can change it. If you hold Alt down and you click, you can kind of drag your view. Obviously, if you don't have a mouse, it'll be a little bit more tricky, and you can see it from all different angles. You can zoom in on it with the roller, and you'll see that hasn't changed what you're seeing as a gamer. If you're playing this game, it's only the scene view. You click on the object, and here we have its existing assets. Okay. Well, this is a new addition to the latest Unity. That's kind of interesting. If you have an older version of Unity, the box collider won't be there by default. Just something to think about, but we'll get into that in a second. And so up here you have a couple of different tool kind of pits. Move object. If I click that, you get these arrows. And in 3D, obviously, we have 3 dimensions. So we have 3 arrows. In 2D, you only have 2. And these arrows are really useful because they allow you to drag it along those axes. So more kind of unique dragging kind of features. Just something to think about. Obviously, Alt again to move. Now, this here is your rotation. So if I pick the object, I have these kind of circles. And if I kind of click it, it'll let it rotate. Like that, and you can rotate it along each of its axes. And you'll notice, I'm going to rotate it slightly, you'll see that this number here over in the inspector changes. So while you can do it that way, I can also just unrotate it by changing that value. And I can go back to movement, I can move it up, and you'll see its position here changes. And I can move it back by going 0. Boom, boom, boom. It's now on the 0, 0, 0 coordinate. It's at the origin. I can then click this one here and I can change its shape. And you'll see it changes the scale just here. But once again, I can change it back just by going here. Okay. So, and obviously that changed its position slightly because it did. So those are the main kind of tools you can use to manipulate objects. I personally prefer to use this. So for those of you that don't know, X will be in this direction. So if I make it 4, it'll become wider this way. This is kind of a math concept. Y will be up and down. So if I make that 4, it'll go up like that, wind back. And Z will be kind of this direction here. So if I make that 4, it'll go like that. Okay? So for example, if we want to make like a base plane that we're going to do our game to occur on. What we can do is we can just go 1,000, 1,000. We have, you can kind of see, we have land that we can now play on. Okay. So from the camera's point of view, they just see the land, right? See, no, they can't see that it's a block. They just see the land. And then within this cube, one thing you can do is you can add physics to it, but we won't get to that straight away. We'll get to more kind of colorful, kind of creative kind of things. So down here is the material. This is what it looks like. Okay. So it's default kind of beigey look. What you can do is down here, you can go create, and what you can create is a material. So physics material 3D, right? You can also create. We're gonna get there. Where are we gonna? Normal material. Okay. So physics material. This is for like how objects react with it. So for example, if we give it this, we could go 0. So dynamic friction and static friction. I don't want you to worry too much about the words, but friction basically means how the object, whether it slows down as it's moving across it. Okay, so we can do that, and we can actually rename this. We're gonna rename this slippery. Okay, so we gave it no friction, and then this is called what's called a prefab by a lot of people. So I'm going to drag this straight into the prefab. And so if I go back to my view here and I open my prefab box, I've selected the cube. And if I just drag this onto there, you'll see straight away the material becomes slippery. Okay. So that's something to remember. And that's always there. So if I ever want to make something slippery, it's in my prefabs. Now, this is the materials kind of column. This is where we can kind of be a bit more creative. So if we want it to be like grass, maybe we can make it kind of grassy, have a glossy kind of color to it. We can change how metallic it is. We can give it this grass texture from that pack that we downloaded. So now it's kind of grassy and maybe a little bit darker. Maybe smoothness needs to be changed. So this is from that pack that we downloaded. That's where we got these grassy kind of textures from. See, like that came with the pack. But obviously, otherwise we would just have the default ones. But we can make a dirt. Let's make a brown for dirt. Where would brown be in the color scheme? I'm not very good at colors, in case you were wondering. You can also just do this, make it colorless. Smoothness. Transparent. You can make it opaque. We want like a browny color. I'm very bad at this. I don't want to do that. I don't even know what that is. But yeah, so you can kind of play around with its color. Let's just go for default sake. Let's say we're making a green kind of texture, and we'll make it grassy just to kind of add a bit of kind of grassiness to it. I didn't select the grass apparently. Get a bit of a grassy texture to it, and then that's done. So if I go back down to my assets, I got this now, and I can drag that into the prefabs folder, and then I select my cube and I drag it onto it. Eventually, there we go. So now it's that's what the texture I gave it does. And so you look from the game view, we have this kind of hilly, kind of hillocky kind of view. If that wasn't what you wanted, obviously we can name this something like, I don't know, hills. We can go create new, and we do another material, and maybe we just want this one like a default kind of green, maybe, because we want this to be smooth and slidey, There we go. Now, when you're changing materials, it's annoyingly you can't drag it this way, but you can drag it this way. So you just grab the material and drag it on it. It'll swap it to the new material. We can drag it and swap it back to hills, back to material, back to hills like this, right? So we'll now have this new kind of material. Let's name it, I don't know, green. So now you just have this plain green. You can see from the game view, you just have this green kind of never-ending green that goes off into the distance. Back to scene view. Now, if we're clicking on the camera, we can create another 3D object. Maybe it's a sphere. So if you go from game view, you can kind of see the spheres in the air, kind of the shadow of the sphere. If we go scene view, if we double click on the sphere, it'll bring us in. And you see, because I created it on the camera, it's literally on the camera. One thing you can do really easily is I can see the camera is at position 000. So camera, and the camera is at position 0, 1, minus 10. So sorry, the sphere, okay? And so I can actually just move the sphere kind of its kind of position a little bit. So via this kind of mechanism. So if I make it go 5, it'll go, now it's in front of the camera. See, boom, done. It's kind of understanding the kind of way that that it works. The kind of positioning works. The other thing you can do is if you click on the sphere, and you click on this here, it'll take you to the view of the sphere. Like that, like the top view of the sphere. I was on the camera before. And then you can click on that, it'll take you to that side, that side, that side, top view. And then you can kind of zoom out, and you can kind of see the thing. Now, what I've done here is I've created tagged objects. So basically, they're kind of paired. When, as the sphere will move, the camera will move, and it will stay that position behind it. It's something you can do really easily to kind of make your camera follow your game object. So now we have the ball. Okay, and so I can change the ball again. I can create another material, and I can make this a color for the ball. So let's say we want the ball to be, I don't know, let's make it a bright pink color. Okay, like that. I can then drag the, I'm in game view, that's why. I can drag it onto the ball, and now the ball is that color. Now, obviously, some of the colors might not be exactly what you want them to be. That's because of the settings. So, like, if I want it to, and the way it reflects light. So you can make it, like, more transparent. If you want more of a pinky, more of a red. And stuff like that. Look at game view, it's a little bit better view of the game. You can change its smoothness, so its metallicness changes. Make it kind of like meshy kind of colored. Obviously we've got a lot of shadow on it right now. You can only change by moving the light. So kind of like you can change those kind of settings a little bit. So now it's kind of like smoothie. If you can kind of, I'm in game view again. Alt, you can kind of see it's kind of smoothie. And if I were to look at the light, I can do you can kind of change the light, which will change how you view. If that kind of see how like you can how things are viewed because the shadows from the view from the is you know, you can go no shadows. Now we have no shadow on the ball. So game view. It looks really weird with no shadows though, I think. Anyway, just something to think about is that you can change the actual light. Go hard shadows, soft shadows. You can change the angle. You can change the strength of them. You can actually go to the sphere and you can change stuff as well about the sphere. That kind of changes the way this looks as well. Go no reflections. And stuff like that. We got no physics material on it. If we want to make it slippery too, we can put slippery on it as well. Now they're both slippery. That looks weird because we've kind of ruined our view. There we go. And that's kind of the gist of making a basic sphere. We have the cube, and we can like rename the cube our like ground. Yeah. Okay, so I've named it player, and I've just done a slightly changed the way it looks a little bit, and we're kind of here now. So obviously now we have kind of this kind of scenario where we've got this ground plane, which I've named ground, and we've got a player, and we've got a camera, okay? So, but obviously if we start the game, nothing happens. Very exciting. So how do we make something happen? Well, depending on your version, you might already have a sphere collider added or not. If you don't, you can just go add component, physics, and here you'll have your colliders, your sphere collider. Okay? But what we need to add now is called rigid body. Okay? So we'll add that to the player, and we'll add it to the ground plane. Add physics, rigid body. If you haven't got a collider, add the colliders for the two objects as well, so that it knows a box collider for the ground plane and a sphere collider for your character. Now we're gonna do something on the on this ground plane. I'm gonna take off gravity. Okay, so use gravity, untick it. Okay, because obviously I can show you what happens if we go use gravity. Let's go to the game view. Oh no! Everything's falling! Okay? Obviously, gravity's now been applied to the ground itself, and it's falling throughout. Now, if we click off, you'll see. Ooh, interesting. Now, what happened there was, so now physics is being applied. What happens to a ball when physics is applied to it? Well, it rolls. So, once again, if we play, the ball is rolling. Okay? So, constraints here. Fixed position, X, Y, Z. Fixed rotation, X, Y, Z. We don't want the ground plane to move, okay? So we just want it fixed everywhere. What this does is it means that when I press play now, no gravity on the ground plane doesn't move. If the ground plane isn't moving, no force is being applied to the ball, so the ball's not moving. Awesome. So the ball has gravity and physics now, but obviously the ground plane doesn't move. Okay, so awesome, perfect. Let's go back and let's dock this ball onto the camera. And now let's click on the little arrows here and let's move the ball a little bit in the air. And so we can kind of see what happens. Press play. The ball falls. Awesome. Perfect. Right, so now the ball has gravity. Now, you can kind of play around with this a little bit, kind of see what happens if I create, so kind of play again. Ball falls. Boom. Awesome. Now, let's create a 3D object. Let's create a cube. Boom. Let's go to scene view and let's move the cube a little bit. Kind of, press Alt and drag it. We want to kind of move it so the ball just hits the edge. game view. That's a bad view, isn't it? But if we go back to scene and we'll move it so it's on the other side. Game view. Now let's press play. Boom. Okay. So now we have physics. So the ball is going to hit the cube. The cube, that might not have worked if you have an older version because you might have to add a box collider to the cube. That's fine. We can also make the cube slippery, and then we'll get a fast reaction. See, a little bit faster, slips off a little bit better. So now we have physics. Now, kind of one more quick example. If I create another cube, let's go scene view and let's move this cube to kind of here, and then we've got the camera. Let's move him up to, and then back another 5. Now, oh, did I stuff up that placement? Apparently I did. So we want this. That. I'm stuffing this placement up left, right, and center, aren't I? So we want this cube to be over here. We want this cube to be over here. We'll press Alt. Kind of, let's see how that goes. Move a little bit more. You'll see it'll hit. Boom. Okay? Now, we stop the ball. Now, this other cube has a collider to it. We're going to make this one slippery as well. They both have colliders to them, but they don't have rigid bodies, so they don't have physics. So if we now add component, physics, rigid body, and we add component, physics, rigid body, make sure that we add the right rigid body to the ball. We did. Now let's press play. Okay, so now they're getting moved by the ball. The ball has force to it, right? So the ball moves the objects when it hits it as well. So before they were fixed in position, now they're not. So if we wanted to, we could go cube 1. This is the original cube. And we can actually fix it in position now. Watch this. But not fix the other one. So now when it hits the first one, it won't move it. But when it hits the second one, it will move it. So that's kind of introduction to how we want to do it. Now let's say that we wanted to use these cubes a lot. These are our two kind of things we want to do a lot with. We can name them. So we can name this maybe it fixed cube. And we can rename this moving cube. I'm very good with my names. And we can go over here and we can create a material. We want these to look very metallic, maybe. We want them really shiny. And let's make them like I don't know, a bluey kind of shine to them. And then we can drag it onto them. And then what we can do is put this in our prefabs. We can actually drag them into our prefab section straight from. Now, every time we want a new one, we can just drag it. Boom, cube 2, boom, cube 3, boom, cube 3, 4. They all have the exact same kind of attributes of those cubes and work exactly the same way. So these are all fixed cubes. Yeah, see, they're not awesome. Right? Looked really weird, didn't it? We can delete the fixed cubes because obviously we don't want them. Just go delete, delete, delete. We want moving cubes. Let's jump in some moving Did I name them the wrong way around? I did name them the wrong way around. Silly me. So this is a moving cube. And this is a fixed cube. That won't rename the prefab though. But, and then I'll need to rename these. Fixed. It's not going to let me do that. Because it's already named something. So we should just rename that F cube, Fe cube. And we'll now rename this fixed cube. And now rename this moving cube, obviously. Okay. So now we can keep on dragging moving cubes. I don't want to parent them. Some moving cubes. And if I click the shoot, delete. I don't know what I did then. And we press play. We now have 2 moving cubes. Boom, boom. Okay. The other thing is, if you have a fixed cube, you might want to fix its rotation as well, because they can rotate. You kind of saw that happen then. So if you want it to be completely stationary, don't let it rotate. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is a reminder that where we're at, we're here right now, where we have the object falls and it moves an object. Okay, so the other thing quickly I want to look at is within a player, on the rigid body, we can make them have a heavier mass, maybe than our object, so that they move and hit them faster, so mass. If you are going to change the mass, which I recommend you do play around with mass, and I recommend you do this anyway, is that you just make your ground plane just a mass of something ridiculous. Because this is not such a big concern with some of the older Unities, but one of the things that add on the new Unity is that if you're really heavy and you're falling, you kind of go into the object, but it's really annoying. But just make your ground plane super, super heavy, and now you'll see it moves the block a little bit more easily. Because the player, weighs more. And so this cinema machine is what I wanted to show you, mostly. Obviously you run, this is why it's so great, okay? So we're going to add it. Go cinema machine, create virtual camera, we've got it, okay? Then the 2 components we're going to look at is follow and look at. For now, follow will be what the camera follows, and look at is what the camera looks at. So if you wanted to, what you could do is I could go look at, I recommend, to be honest, that you just go player. So it's going to follow and look at the player, okay? And I'll show you what that looks like. So press play. Oh, I stuffed that up. My bad. We're going to go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Go back. Okay. We're making the mass of the thing as high as possible. Done. We have to untag the player because the virtual camera will move your existing camera. So just quickly untag your player, then create your virtual camera. And then drag your player in there. Because adding this CMV cam will move your existing camera because it's an add-on that manipulates your camera. Now we'll press play, and you'll see that the camera kind of follows your object. Okay. Now we can stop, and one of the reasons it's so good is we have this here called follow offset. So this is kind of how far behind it follows. So if we just change this number here to -5, it'll just be just behind, a little bit closer. So if we press play, we can kind of see it sticks a little bit closer to the ball. Right. And then we can also go maybe added a couple of things in the air. See down to the air a little bit. Press play. And you'll see now we kind of get this slight aerial view of what's happening. Which is really kind of cool. If you wanted to maybe change the way the camera viewed and it follows the player, but it always looks at ground, so you get like a bird's eye view. It's going to be a little bit hard to do that because ground obviously is so huge. You can press play, and it's always looking at the ground plane. Kind of like that. that'll always look at the center of that object that you select to follow, and obviously the center of the ground's in a set location. But that's just something to think about, and that's kind of really valuable. So again, that I really, you also have these things called dampening and offsetting. If I go to game view, you can kind of see them. What I would say is that if you want to use these, watch the video on them. They are very good if you're doing specific things, especially in 2D and where you're controlling movement. And so basically, dampening will mean and offsetting will basically mean that if I'm moving this circle rather than it moving itself, the camera won't move until you hit this outside kind of square. And so, like, I run this way, the camera doesn't just move with me, you get to see me move that way. So depending on the kind of game that you're playing, you're making, you might want to change these because they're. You also have dead zones. So like I can see how dead zone, I can kind of change it now. So now the object can move within this kind of space before the camera actually moves. So you might be able to see that. Obviously it looks a bit weird where it's like there you kind of get to see the ball fall straight away for a little bit, and then it kind of moves. So if I make that's the soft width. If I make this larger, let's see what happens. You see what I mean? It's a bit hard to see when you have you're not moving the object, but if you were moving the object, you'd see what I mean. I could like move to the edge of this, and the camera wouldn't move, and then I'd move past it, and the camera would move with you. That's kind of the general idea. You can also change the size of the camera, the position of the camera, and stuff like that. So that's kind of all I wanted to show you today. I really recommend that you kind of play around having a go at doing some of the things that I'm doing, and then I'll make another video on how to like add some code and do some more cool things with it.